So this is my informative speech about how has coronavirus affected our mental health. So to start off, it's been around a year since we were declared with having the coronavirus pandemic. I know many of us remember leaving spring break with glee and just being very happy that we had an extra week of vacation. But then many of us, we started hearing the rumors about the virus. We started seeing people get toilet paper and things started going south from there. And it was not until March 2020 that it was declared actually a pandemic and we began our quarantine. And although coronavirus has existed for around 10,000 years, according to an article called A Case for Origin of Coronavirus, we have barely had to deal with this sickness today. And I feel like since we see people, we see it affect our family members, we see it affect our friends, it is now time to question how that has affected our mental health and what is causing all of this change. So, like everyone, I have dealt with quarantine and being alone in isolation because we cannot go out for a long period of time. So to start off, the coronavirus pandemic has affected mental health by worsening pre-existing conditions, causing stress, depression, anxiety, as well as causing the increase of substance abuse, which I will get onto later. As I mentioned, the coronavirus pandemic has caused the worsening of pre-existing conditions, which I will explain a bit. So, conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, PTSD, eating disorders, or even sleeping disorders have increased during this pandemic and they have worsened due to the isolation and quarantine and the lack of help that these people have been getting because of the not being able to go out as much as they could before. So I got all of this information from an article called The Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Adult Mental Health by Tijuana, done in 2020, as well as an article called How Coronavirus is Affecting Mental Health of Millions of Americans by another person called Ms. McIntyre, which this article was published in 2020. Another thing about the pre-existing conditions is that they have in fact gotten a lot worse, and there have been higher risks for contracting the coronavirus. An evidence of this was a WHO report that was conducted in China, which told us that 65% of people are now 65% of people have a higher chance of contracting coronavirus when they have all of these conditions, which just create an endless cycle. And also another thing is that according to research done by Ms. Imran, COVID-19 has caused the rise of these illnesses. It has made it worse, as I mentioned earlier. These long-term issues are getting worse. For example, the depression, as I mentioned, the isolation has just caused it to be worse. Now, it has worsened pre-existing conditions, but it has also caused new conditions to appear in people that did not have them before. An example of this would be anxiety, depression, stress, and I will get right on that about how it has affected stress and anxiety. So having a pandemic, we have had to use these masks that will help us. And these masks have, although these masks have created a lot of controversy, these masks have helped us throughout the pandemic. And yeah, we have used these masks throughout the whole pandemic. And having a pandemic has caused a lot of people to use these masks to be more preventative. Most people have become more careful. Most people have become more clean, more caution. And this has caused a lot of anxiety and stress for so many people that did not worry about things like this before. So there has been the increase of anxiety and many other things, as I mentioned. It has also been projected on children as well as adults. Some children begin to have bad mental health, which can be shown in increased sadness. It can be shown by acting out, having tantrums, having annoying behavior. And according to the coronavirus pandemic impact on mental health, it has just gotten a lot worse for children now, and they need resources to help them, which is something I will get right on as well. Lastly, all this stress, anxiety, and depression has led to different coping mechanisms that people need to use, and some of them not being so healthy. For example, drugs and violence and things like that. In the light of the virus, many people have had to deal with alcohol issues. They had to deal with bad coping mechanisms, and I found this in an article, 2020 McIntyre. And it is clear that coronavirus has affected each of us differently. And I will just get right on with a small summary about what I have said so far. That although everyone has reacted differently, it is important to note that many people feel the same way and that they have had to deal with these things. And although it seems impossible at times, it is good that we look up and then we think about how things are getting better now that we have developed a vaccine, and how hopefully we won't have to think about this ever again for a long time. Thank you for listening to my speech.